This is the opening statement for the prosecution for the trial advocacy final exam in the case of State versus Harris. Good evening, Your Honor. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Nico Rieger, and I represent the NIDA State Attorney's Office. More specifically, due to the nature of this offense, I'm here to seek justice on behalf of Mr. Henry Fordyce. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear testimony from the hospital accounting what's happened to Mr. Fordyce today. And I want to go ahead and caution you before we start ahead of time, because some of the testimony that you're going to hear today and some of the testimony that you're going to be seeing today is quite graphic. You're going to hear about a very violent assault. You're going to hear about a series of abdominal injuries. You're going to hear about a series of skull fractures. You're going to see pictures of these injuries. You're going to see the blunt instrument that was used to cause these injuries. But the main question, as we're standing here, that you're probably all asking yourself is, why did all this happen? Why are exactly we here today? So I'm going to go ahead and tell you that we're here today because a misogynist hothead couldn't handle a simple bar fight. He couldn't let it go. Instead, he let the temper he has get the best of him. And Gerald Harris is a very successful businessman in NIDA. You're going to hear testimony about his ego. You're going to hear about the way that he believes that he can talk to people, specifically the way he treats women and how he conducts himself with strangers in a bar setting. You're going to come to see how this man turned out what could have been a simple night out with friends into something much more confrontational and something much more sinister. You're going to get the opportunity to see and hear all of this when Gerald Harris testifies before you today. He is probably going to tell you something along the lines of how he went back to his office to get some cleaning supplies or to clean his office. And I want you to ask yourself throughout the entirety of this trial, is that something that each and every one of you would do? Is that something that is likely for you to go back to your office to conduct business at midnight after hours of drinking? And I want you to ask yourself, is it more likely that this man, based on all the evidence that you're going to hear, went back to the scene of this original bar fight in order to settle the score? And if all this wasn't enough, you're going to hear from Ava Long, who saw him and her and his friend in the alleyway, and only after she was subjected to being assaulted by him twice that night. You're going to hear testimony that he originally knocked her down in the bar fight, and then you're going to hear her say that she was knocked down a second time in the hall in the alleyway afterwards. What you're going to hear is testimony about his shady business practices. You're going to hear about the disparaging language he uses, like hooker and prostitute, and you're going to come to see why this man couldn't help himself. You're going to hear about how the police came and broke up this fight, and he got some good shots going in on Henry, and that was only after he once again put his hands on Ava Long. And Mr. Harris wasn't finished there, was he? That's what you're going to come to see. There was no way he was going to leave it up to interpretation who got the best of who here. There was no way that this hothead wasn't going to go back and try and settle up the score. But as you're going to see today, this man isn't a man who fights very fair. Mr. Harris stalked Henry into this alleyway and proceeded to beat him with a pulp, with a wooden broomstick that caused him skull fractures and abdominal injuries that cost him to miss many months of work and interrupt his livelihood. And you're also going to hear testimony from the bartender, who is another example of a woman that he harassed that night and used disparaging language towards, that places him near the scene of the crime when he said that he was going to meet his girlfriend. And all of this is going to help us meet the elements of intent, of serious bodily injury by means of a deadly weapon. So once we've proven those three elements, you, ladies and gentlemen, will have no choice but to return a verdict of guilty. And I would like to thank you for your time here today. And once again, implore you to think critically. And once we have proven all these elements, you must return a verdict of guilty. Thank you.